Good morning, and thank you again for joining us. This is Mark Morris with Word of Faith Fellowship, and we're so glad that you're listening today. We have so enjoyed sharing with you what Jesus has done in our lives at the Word of Faith Fellowship, and we have had many members of our church come on this radio program now for going on 9 months, sharing with you all the wonderful things Jesus has done in our lives. And today I have Becky with us. She is actually from Wilmington, originally born in New York, and you're going to hear a very powerful testimony today of how God has truly healed her heart. She had a very rough childhood, frankly, one of the roughest childhoods I have ever heard of in my life. And the fact that she's sitting here with us today and she's happy and God has changed her heart is an absolute miracle. And I believe when you hear her testimony, you will agree with me. And I just was thinking about a verse, and I want to read this verse to you this morning, that Jesus, it says in Isaiah 61, and it was talking about the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ. And it says that the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to preach the gospel and to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to those who are captive and in prison. And that was so true. And we know that when Jesus came, that's exactly what he did. And he even went to the synagogue and read this passage and said, this is fulfilled today. And I could not help but think how Jesus comes to heal our broken hearts. And so many testimonies we have had on this radio program was people who had broken hearts through different things, through maybe it was family that didn't treat them the way they should have been treated, or circumstances, and things go wrong, and their hearts were broken. And today you're going to hear about a young lady whose heart was truly broken as a child, and how Jesus came and healed her broken heart. So Becky, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jim, for having me. As Mark said, I was born in New York, and my parents, they knew nothing about God. They did not teach us about God. They didn't even really speak about God at our house. And until I was 6, life was good. We had a normal family upbringing. And then when I was 6, my dad left to come to Wilmington for about a year. And I was very, very devastated. My dad and I were very close, and things were real rough for me about that time. And then he came back after the year, and he stayed for maybe a month or two, and then he left again. And that was just as devastating. And the day my mom told me that they were getting a divorce, she dropped me off. And the last thing she said to me was, go to your cheerleading practice, and by the way, me and your dad are getting a divorce and he's moving to Wilmington. And I was like, okay. And there was one thing that happened though before all that happened, is when I was younger, when things first started taking place with my parents, I never forget, my mom was in the kitchen. I came home from school and she was just taking every plate in the house and throwing it in the sink and shattering it. And I didn't understand why, but I was really upset. And I ran out the door and I just started crying. I was sitting under a tree and I was crying. And she came out there and she's like, what are you crying for? And I didn't know even what to say to her. And she just said, well, just sit there and cry. And that was the day that I really started shutting down all my emotions, because I figured nobody really cared anyway. So why did I even need to open up my heart to people? So it was me and my mom and my brother after my dad left. And about 2 years after that, my brother left. And that was another devastating moment in my life, because me and my brother, we kind of bonded together even closer after my dad left us. And he left to be with my dad because he was going through some rough times, and it was better for him to leave New York and go to Wilmington. That's when my mom got a friend, and it was a lady friend, and things went downhill fast for me. Every day it was the whole situation. You're worth nothing. You're worthless. Why were you born? You're ugly. You're this. You're that. And
did this lady friend actually move into your house
yes,
with your
she
mom?
moved
So
into
it was
the
the
house.
3 of you living together.
It was the 3 of us living together.
And you're saying these very hurtful things. Were these things being said to you?
They were being said to me.
Okay.
It was a lot of mental abuse, a lot of verbal, a lot of physical abuse also that went on. And she told me one day, she said, "You'll move out before I ever will."
This is the friend.
That
your
was the
mother's
friend, my mother's
Okay.
friend, yes. And I was pretty terrified of her because of all the physical abuse that I went through from her. So if she said something, I tried to walk that line. So there was one time my mom went into the hospital and she said, "You don't love your mother anyway, so don't ask anything about her." So I didn't. I didn't ask one thing. So when she came home that night, she said, "What kind of child are you that you're not going to ask about your own mother?" And she literally grabbed me by my hair and started smashing my face into a mirror and saying, "Look at yourself, look at yourself. What kind of person could you be to do that?" From that time forward, for a long time, I could not even look at myself in a mirror. If somebody even said, "Look at yourself, you got a little bit of makeup on your eye," I mean, I was just like I couldn't do it. I just started shaking because it was not just like one smash in the mirror. It was like a continual face smashed in the mirror. And I started realizing, you get said that stuff enough, you believe it. You start believing you're worthless. You start believing you're worth nothing. You start believing, that your dad left because of you and your brother left because of you. And that starts forming your personality. And I could not look at people. If people looked at me, I would just do this. And I really started thinking about committing suicide at a very young age. It was probably about 11. I started thinking about committing suicide. And my mom, I don't know why she told me this, except God must have, told her to tell me this. I don't know what happened. But she told me one day, she said, "If you ever commit suicide, you'll go straight to hell." And that put a fear in me that there's got to be a heaven and a hell. There's got to be a God somewhere. If there's a hell, there's got to be a heaven. So there was one day I was home by myself because I was left home alone a lot. When my parents worked, or not my parents, but my mom and her lady friend worked, I was home by myself. And I was in my living room, and on the shelf was this Bible. Now, it wasn't anything we looked at. It was like a decoration, like your pencil box right there. It was just something on the shelf. And I pulled it out, and I opened it up, and I just said, "God, are you really real? Are you really, real? Are you out there, And I just started turning the pages, and I was just like, crying. I was like, "God, if you're real, there's got to be something that you can do for me." And things didn't change right away, and things actually got a little bit worse, and made me even question more, But every time I thought of ending my life, I would pull that Bible back out, and I'd say, "Okay, God, are you real? Are you real?" Well, one day it got really bad, and my mom, I had to eat in the dining room because this lady, she said if she even looked at me, it made her sick, while we were eating. I said, she would tell me all the time, she said, "I'll throw up if I have to eat at the same table as you."
So you had to eat in a separate place.
I had to eat in a separate place. My mom would make my plate and put me in the dining room. I couldn't even come in the kitchen because of the stuff she would say. And I was just like, I can't live with this much longer. I'm not going to make it. And something happened, and my mom pulled me out of the chair. And I didn't tell you this part, but when she asked me that, she was actually hitting me when she asked me. And she's like, she slapped me across the face. And when my mom slapped you, it was not like a little slap. She actually left her handprint across your face. And she was doing that, and she asked me, she said, "Do you want to go live with your father?" And I'm like, yes, send me. And it was like an answer to prayer. It was like, "God, you're real because you got me out of this situation." So it was like that weekend. That was probably a Monday around that time. That weekend, I was on a plane to go live with my father. But my mom didn't tell my dad I was coming until an hour before I was supposed to land into Wilmington. So he was pretty irate that I was there. I think he was more irate about the situation than anything else. But she told me, she said, you don't got to worry about what your dad thinks because you're not going to stay there long anyway. He's not going to want you, so you're not going to be there long anyway. So I was like, okay. So I got off the plane, and he was irate. And he sat me down. He said, I want you out of this house by the time you're 18.
This is his introduction to you.
That was his introduction to me.
Had you been seeing your dad? You were living with your mom in New York. Your dad was had you been seeing him at all?
Maybe 2 weeks out of the summer,
Okay.
I'd go see him. You know, I didn't spend much time with him because he worked a lot. So that was kind of his introduction.
Right.
You know. And I was like, okay. But at least I know you're not going to hit me. That's all I knew. At least I know you. I said, I'll be out by the time I'm 18. I even told him that. I said, I'll be out by the time I'm 18. Don't worry.
How old were you when this
I was
happened?
14.
Okay.
I was 14 years old when that happened. And so 16, from 14 to 16, it was okay. I went to school. I didn't make any friends because I didn't know how. I was just like, I was made fun of because of my accent. I was just like, so I didn't really communicate with anybody. So by the time I was 16, I went to Job Corps, which was actually closer up here. I'm not sure. I don't really remember where. But I went to a place called Job Corps. Well, the people tried to talk me out of going because they said people that go there, they're juvenile delinquents. They're not good people, you know. And I was very timid, and they said, you're going to get into a big mess. I did not listen, and I went anyway. And my dad, with his approval, sent me. Even though he knew what kind of place it was, he still sent me. And I was there for a while, and I got into a real bad relationship, just pretty much like they said it was going to happen. And my brother found out about the kind of conditions I was living in, and he found out about where I was living. By this time, he was 17, well, almost 18. He was married with 2 children.
Did you actually move? You said you got in a relationship. Did you move in with somebody?
I did.
And you were how old then?
16.
Okay.
16 and a half. And he found out about it, and he came and got me. And he said, I am going to put you in my house, and you're going to live with me. He said, you can live there as long as you want to. He said, if you just help me with my children, I won't charge you anything. Just live with me. And he took care of me the best he knew how. He was good to me. And but there was still this place in my heart. I wanted God. And really, one thing I realized, even by reading my testimony, is God will meet you where you're at. He'll come to you. If you really cry out to him, he'll meet you where you're at. And there was this place in my heart, and I sat on the couch one day. I said, God, I want to get to know you. I want to go to church. There's got to be something, because you got me out of this situation. You got me out of this situation. And I want to know you. So that week, my brother came and he said, this guy I work with, he goes to this church, New Covenant. Do you want to go? He asked if we want to go. Do you want to go? And I said, sure, I'll go. And I thought it was amazing, because it was like, when I cried out to God and I prayed, everything always happened real fast, you know. Mm-hmm. So we went to New Covenant, and that was actually Sue's church, and she's been here on the radio, and she shared her testimony before. So we went to her church, and we were there for about 2 weeks. I'm still like all shut down, and she said, do you want to go out to eat? And I was like, okay. And we're sitting across from your table, and we're eating, and she says, so tell me something about yourself. And I'm like, I just sat in silence, and I'm like, because I thought if she knew about my life and who I really was, she would say, you need to find somewhere else to go. This is not the place for you. So, but she realized I wasn't going to say a lot, so she started telling me about herself. And out of that, it was like, I listened, and I started trusting her. So I might say a little bit here, or I'd tell her a little bit there. And shortly after that, I got to know Tony and Kathy. And
they were going to the New Covenant well.
Also, yes.
And we've had Kathy share on this radio.
We've had Kathy, yes, we have. And I call them Mom and Dad now, because they taught me a lot. I got to know them, and I would go over to their house some. And Kathy would help me a lot. She would say, okay, let's fix your hair, because I didn't know how. She'd say, let me show you how to wear some makeup. I didn't know how to do that.
You never were taught these things growing up.
I was never taught. I wasn't even taught to brush my teeth every day. You know, there's just not something. I wasn't taught how to match your clothes. I wasn't taught you wear shoes when you go places and match your shoes with your outfit. So she had to teach me all that stuff. Brush your hair before you walk out. At least brush it, you know, before you walk out the door. I wasn't taught any of that. So she would labor with me at night, and she would teach me. And one of the things she would labor with me with was how to open up my heart. Because she would say, what do you want to eat? And I'd say, I don't know. You know, and that was always my answer. When I didn't want to really open up my heart, I'd always say, I don't know. And she'd say, no, what do you want to eat? And I'd say, a hamburger. And that was a little step there. She'd say, good, okay, let's go get a hamburger. And if I opened up my heart and I said I wanted something, she would make sure I got it. Even if, you know, for a while I lived with her and Tony. And even to the point of, I liked this certain comforter set, and she found out about it, and she bought it for me because she found out I liked it. All I said is, Mom, I called her Mom. I said, Mom, I really like that. That's pretty. And a couple days later, it was on my bed, and I just cried because I knew God had did that for me, and He was showing me how much He loved me. And Tony, he was a real stable block in my life. He was to the point, you know, I said I wanted to do something, and he said no. I said, but I really, and he'd say no. And if he said no, I knew it meant no. But it was in the sweetest way he would tell me no.
They were really like parents to you.
They were really like parents. They taught me how to live in a family.
Yes. Parents.
And they taught me, like, they had 2 children. They have 2 children. And they taught me how to live in a family setting, you know, having a mom, having a dad, having a mom and dad together, which I didn't really remember having too much. And it was real precious to me, and still is. They're still very, very precious people to me, still mom and dad to me. And so time went on, and I just started crying out. I started working for somebody in the church. And as I did that, I started crying out more and more. And the more I cried out, the happier I got. And the happier I got. Just simple crying out, Jesus, I want to know you. I want to know who you are. Jesus, who are you? You created me. You've answered prayers. Who are you? And God would show up every time I opened my heart. And then I came here for seminar, because our church was affiliated with this church. So I came up here for seminar, and I got to see, it was a youth seminar at that point, and I got to see people my age, and they were so happy, and I couldn't believe it, and I wanted that. And I was here for a whole week, and I wanted to stay. I didn't want to leave, and I wanted to stay because they were so happy. And later I realized what they were is they had Jesus in their heart, and they knew Jesus. And I wanted that. I was grasping for that. And so I kept crying out, Jesus, I want to know you. And then I started crying out and praying, Jesus, I want a friend. I want somebody that I can open up my heart to, that I can talk to, that I can share with what you're doing in my life and find out what Jesus is doing in their life. And God sent me Roger, and we got married, and but he was so sweet to me. He was the type of person, if you need a drink of water and you say I'm thirsty, before you could even look, he's handing you a drink of water. That's just the type of person he is.
That sounds exactly how he is now.
He is still that way. And I was laying in bed one day, and I said, Jesus, I feel like, it was about a month that we had been friends. I said, Jesus, I feel like there's supposed to be a switch in our relationship. And Jesus said, there is. You're supposed to be married. And I was like, okay. So then later we got married, and he's been the biggest blessing. And later, you know, we've always been taught here at this church, if God says something, it's going to happen. If God says, this is what I've said for you to do, it's going to happen. It will happen. And so when God said that we're to be married, I knew it was going to happen, because God had proven Himself so faithful to me before. And we got married, and then we cried out, God, we feel like we're supposed to have a child. And God said, yes, you're supposed to have a child. Well, doctors said no. Everybody else said no because of some physical issues that I had. And I cried out. I said, God, I know what you said. I know you said we're going to have a child. And we did. I have a 4-year-old little girl. She is the biggest blessing. She loves to preach. She loves to play. She loves to sing. I was telling Mark, I said, she loves to walk up to you and say, hi, what's your name? I'm Kaylee. And she's so open-hearted. She just loves people. It amazes me how much she loves people. It doesn't matter if you're in the grocery store. She's going to say, hey, you know, how are you? And, but it was because God said, and I knew it was going to come to pass. And then some things came where she got very sick, and the word of the Lord came that God was not going to steal your child. And I didn't quite understand that, but when she got real sick and she stopped breathing, I started crying out to God, and I said, God, you said, the word of the Lord was, you said you're not going to steal this the devil was not going to steal this child. And he didn't. God came through again, and God was faithful again. And he's always proved himself faithful.
At some point, you obviously moved here.
You live
here now.
I live here now.
Did you move here to Spindale and join the Word of Faith Fellowship? Did you move before Kaylee was born, or
we moved before Kaylee was born? I actually moved before I was married. Roger moved 6 months before I was. Before I moved. Mm-hmm. And then God had spoke to me that it was time for me to move. So I found a real good job here. And then I moved here to Word of Faith. And then it was maybe a year after I lived here, Roger and I got married. And then we got married in 2010. And then 3 years after that, we had Kaylee. And she came. And it's just really God's faithfulness. And then time went on, and I still have a great relationship with my brother. And then as time went on, my mom my biological mom, she actually wrote me a letter. And she repented, really. And she said, you know, your childhood was because of me. You had a rough life because of me. And one thing I was taught, though, is if she knew Jesus, she would not have done what she did. If she had known Jesus, and I forgave her, and now our relationship is being really restored. I'm able to give her Jesus, and she cannot believe what has become of me. She looks at me and she's awestruck. She's like, I can't believe how you've turned out. She said, I can't believe, you know, what God has done for you. And I saw her for the first time in 14 years this summer. And that's when she saw me, she just was like, I can't believe it. And Kaylee sang to her. She sang Amazing Grace to her. And she just cried. And I realized, I went back again, and all I could say was, in my heart was, you know, that would not have happened to me if those people would have known Jesus. Because Jesus doesn't treat people like that. But I was able to look at her, and I was able to tell her I love her, and I was able to give her a hug, which I was not able to do in my childhood. And I was able to tell her it'll be okay. I, because of Jesus, am okay, and I am the way I am because Jesus did that for me, and He answered all my prayers. And she actually cried when I told her that. And my brother, he was with us, and he kind of stood back, and he shook his head, and he knew it was like a restoring. And I said, you don't have to worry about, you know, what happened, because God has taken care of me.
That's great.
And
now your dad, have you had contact with your dad?
My dad passed away when I was 21, but before he passed away, we actually worked things out, and that's how I realized he was more irate at the situation than me.
Right.
And we worked things out, and there never went a day where my dad didn't tell me he loved me. You know, and we became very close again before he passed away. He moved to Florida shortly after I started the church. Him and his wife moved to Florida. And shortly after that, he got very sick. and he got this. They couldn't quite figure out what he had, and we moved him back to Wilmington so we could take care of him. My brother and I, we moved him back to Wilmington, put him in the hospital in Wilmington. And one night we were, I spent the night with him. My brother had spent a lot of days with him, and I wanted to spend the night with him. And I just laid on the floor, Mark, in that hospital room, because I knew he didn't know God. And I laid on the floor and I wept and I wept, and he was sleeping. And nurses might have walked in and thought I was weeping because his time was coming short. But really I was weeping because I realized his time was coming short, and I wanted God to have mercy on his life. And I just cried out, and I wept, and I said, God, if there's any place you could have mercy on him, please have mercy. And God was faithful again, because my dad woke up that morning, and for the first time I'd ever heard him mention God, he pulled me over to the bed, and he said, Becky, I feel like I need to get my heart right with God. He said, I feel like I need to make things right with God. And I knew he was kind of like, it was a strange thing for him. And I just looked at him, I said, yes, you do. And he said, you're right, I do. And 3 days after that, he passed away. And I know that was another place God had mercy on me, because when he died, I really had a peace in my heart that he came to the realization he needed to make things right with God. And I got prayer, and I had a peace in my heart, and I was just like, Jesus, you're in control of everything. I don't know anything, but I know you're in control. And I know whatever God does, he does it right, and he does it perfect. And just like I could save my marriage and my child, one thing I've been taught to is God always gives us the best. Whatever he gives us is the best. And my marriage has been the best. The church I go to is the best. The pastors I have are the best. The friends I have are the best. Everything I have is the best. And God has just been very faithful to us. And
that is so great, Becky. What a transformation you are. I was
Happy
thinking about, as you're talking here, you're so happy, and I was thinking about how I was picturing this little girl, and you couldn't even hold your head up, and you just shut down and couldn't talk to anybody, and felt like nobody loved you, and people were rejecting you, your mom and friend, and all these people rejecting you, and how here you are today, and you're so full of love because Jesus came to you. And then you shared how God restored your relationship with your mom and even your dad before he passed away. So truly a miracle that we have heard today, and that was such a blessing. And thank you again for listening to us. This is Word of Faith Fellowship, sharing with you what God has done in our lives. We are here on this radio program Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9. We have a website if you want to see other radio programs. They're all on our website. You can go to that at wordoffaithfellowship.org, and we hope you have a great day.